Hey everybody, we're going to go ahead and kick off for tonight. I think it's 7 o'clock, so if you can, grab a seat. We have some chairs up here. Nick does not buy, so there's plenty of space for everyone, but we'll go ahead and start. So as always, just a big announcement, just a big thank you to Capital Factory for giving us the space. For those that have been here before, they did a new layout and they were going to change it back, but being lean, I was like, let's run an experiment. Let's see what happens. I think with this layout, I saw a lot more socialization. So it's interesting how the feng shui of the room connected us a little bit better. How many people are here for the first time? Okay, very cool. A little more than normal. Normally we get about 50-50. It looks like Nick has brought out a lot of new people. How many people are familiar with Lean Startup, have read either the Lean Startup book or Running Lean? Awesome, wow, okay, a lot of knowledge in here. So just one announcement before I turn it over to Nick. Jeremiah Cooper, who wrote the Lean Brand book, and who's taught here before, he's out in San Jose. He is doing a Lean Brand Lab, so he's inviting 12 companies to go for a 2-day workshop. It's going to be an accelerator out there. The deadlines are coming up. It's at the end of the month. It's like February 27th. But Jeremiah is a phenomenal marketer, really good at building communities, building a brand, being very expressive with it. So if it's something that you're interested in, I'm going to send out a link to the whole group, but I just wanted to throw it out there for you guys. So for tonight's presentation, someone once gave me a quote about change. And he said, change is great as long as it's happening to someone else. Yeah. And I think for anyone who's ever gone and actually tried to create change within an organization, if you've been an early adopter to Lean Startup and then you're all empowered by it, you feel great, and you try to take it to your team, and you're like, hey, we need to go run these experiments, landing pages, all this stuff, and they're like, I'm busy coding, I can't do any of that stuff right now. I need to finish building this feature and get it out. So that's a lot of times when you've gone and you've actually tried to get someone to adopt something new, there's obstacles. And there's tons of books, there's tons of people who have talked about this. But having had a lot of conversations with Nick, and really just seeing how he's worked with a lot of the companies that he helps, in a very graceful way, go about and find, they had an idea of something big that they wanted to do. But then in talking with him, he's got a lot of great tactics on actually how to help them hold on to that big vision, but still try out and test new things. So with that, I'll turn it over to Nick, and please welcome him.
Hi, everybody. So just like the tables tonight, I'm running an experiment with a new piece of technology. It's a beta test by Microsoft, like all of their products. So I've got a Windows tablet, which I love dearly, but I'm running on a wireless adapter, which is the first time I'm doing anything important on it. So if it flakes out, I might jump between. So just spare us, take a moment and wait for you to catch up. All right, so for tonight, lean tactics for your organization. Like Emiliano said, I've spent a lot of time in different organizations, both in the service side, in like a creative agency, and also in in-house and helping people figure out smarter ways to do things. So hopefully I can share some of that experience with you and take something away from it tonight.
Sorry, how's the audio? Is it fine or is it?
Loud enough? Talk. So this is the lovely frozen city of Chicago, which is where I'm from. And it looks just about like this right now, although it's deceivingly beautiful. It's usually gray and disgusting and kind of disgusting. So on one cold winter's day, about 4 years ago in the middle of December, I decided to leave my agency job. And actually, about a week later was the day I actually walked out the door. But one of the critical factors to this is that my urge to escape was so great that I left my bonus on the table. I had about a week to go. I could have got my yearly bonus. But sort of the way all the factors came together, it felt really, really right to leave my job. And there was something kind of ignorantly proud about it in that moment, saying, I'm going to leave all this on the table and go do something else. But I had it's worked out really well. It was kind of dumb at the time. But so the thing is that it definitely felt right. A lot of people thought I was kind of crazy. And I'll talk a little bit about what kind of drove me to that decision and some of the things that I wish I had known before I made the decision. So we'll be going over 5 lean tactics here. I'm trying to stand on TV. 5 lean tactics that I'll be running through some case studies about my experience in the agency world. And these tactics are particularly well suited for larger organizations. I think these are all things that you've done. If you've read the books, you've heard a lot of these or all of them. And maybe you've even implemented some of them in your organizations of any size. But so these are intros to the tactics. They're not full-fledged how-tos. There's so many great books that you guys, some of you have read already, and resources, and I'll list them at the end that you can reference. I'll post all these slides up at the on SlideShare, and then post a link so you guys can check them out later. So a lot of these are from my agency life, but they, I think, are applicable to almost any organization. So I will speak a lot about like clients and account staff and all that fun stuff, but I think it's pretty transferable to most organizations. So the first tactic is include stakeholders early and often, and as many opportunities as you can, get everybody in the same room. So basically, I was a drug dealer for a number of years, but to doctors. So I was in a pharmaceutical advertising agency, and we created materials for people to sell drugs to other people, which was kind of weird and interesting, and learned a whole bunch of stuff learned about a whole bunch of stuff I never thought I would.
I was going to say, do you take any of the things you sold?
Not yet, thankfully. I know a lot of the side effects and kind of creepy.
Yeah.
So I was in the interactive creative group. So I was on the design team. I was on the design team, but I was an art director, and then I actually kind of transitioned and was in the background a secret agent doing guerrilla UX. And well, not that kind of guerrilla, but he needs some help figuring out how to use that thing. But essentially, UX wasn't really a thing when I first started there, and usability was kind of the term that was floating around. Usability studies were kind of big, but UX wasn't so much as a department or a function of the creative process. But I found that doing things like wireframes and kind of being, getting in front of people was helping me out a lot. And so one of the major points here is that a lot of the things I'll be showing you, you may have to do guerrilla style in your organization to be able to get them out there and or to try out those tactics and prove the value to the larger organization, because it's really hard to sell lean in like a hierarchical, kind of traditionally structured organization. So one of my primary functions was building these things called interactive visual aids, IVAs. So if you hear me say IVA, that's what I mean. I basically took these brochures, these print brochures, and turned them into these super cool tablet applications. And if you can see that tablet up there, it's incredibly high tech. It's this big convertible Windows machine. We built it in Flash, which was super awesome. Everything moved around the page, and the main purpose of them was to give to reps, so kind of like I'm doing with this, but if I was trying to sell you drugs right now, which maybe I am, and then give these to reps so that reps can talk to, the sales representatives can talk to doctors and tell them all about the great things and wonderful things that drug does. There was, I think when I started this process, and I know better now, but it seems like a simple conversion, like just slice it in half, turn it to the right, and slap it on the screen. And it just didn't work out like that. There's so many micro design decisions that had to go into it. And in that process, we were really kind of lost. We didn't know what was the right decisions. We had these discussions around, well, I think this is the right feature. I think that's the right feature. Or no, it should be formatted this way. And everyone was just spouting their opinions. And it was like a design off every day. There was just a lot of fighting and bickering around silly things that I know now could have been validated instead of fighting about those. So a lot of this was because of the game of phones that we got to play. And it all starts with the users, the patients in this case. So the patient's needs are kind of paramount here. They're obviously in a situation where they need something from the doctor, right? And if you're being prescribed a medication, it probably means that you might be frustrated, there might be some high emotions, some unknowns, especially if you come down with something that is new to you and it might be scary, right? So I think in those situations, it's especially important for the design team or people creating a product or service to help those people to really intimately know what is going on in their heads. Well, we had a few layers of translation that we had to go through to get to what their needs were. There's the doctors. They're talking to the patients. They have a pretty good idea of what the patient's desires are and what their fears are. But they also have their own set of needs, right? Like they're being pitched every day, here, sell our drug to patients, prescribe this over and over again. And they're being told all the great things about these drugs, and they're supposed to be being told all the bad things about the drugs too, so they can not injure people by prescribing them the wrong drug or the wrong dose. So you've got these reps, they're going into the offices every day. You've also got client marketing teams, and this is really interesting, I think, with, excuse me. How many people in here have worked in a organization that has sales and or marketing? Have you guys experienced the tension between those two teams ever? Ever seen that? That was a fun relationship, isn't it? Because they're really doing the same thing. They're trying to move product or sell a message or whatever it is. They're trying to do something collectively as a whole, but they seem to have totally different ways to go about it. And it never fails that, in my experience, I've never seen a really, really well integrated sales and marketing team where the marketing team really gets what the salespeople are doing and the salespeople really respect the marketing team. There seems to always be a conflict of interest there, which surprised me going into this world. So, getting a little further down, you've got account management on the agency side. And these people are, man, they're in a really tough position. If you guys have ever been in this position, I feel so bad for people kind of stuck in this world because they're trying to interpret all the stuff going on up there, and they're trying to turn it into something that everyone inside can understand and meet. They basically have to be the yes men and no men to everybody. Like they have to say yes to everything that comes down from the client, and then have to try to distribute that down to the teams in a way that makes them engaged and excited to work on it, as opposed to being kind of a ticket writer and sending orders down the chain. So what these two do together, and I'm not sure if this is how it is in every situation, but at least in the agency world, you usually have some sort of strategist or planner that's working with the account staff. And that's those two usually come up with the overall strategy. So the client has a problem, they need something built, they need something solved, they want to make more money. They ask the agency, hey, make us more money by doing X, Y, and Z. They collectively figure out what that plan is, they write a design, they write a project brief, which I think is common in a lot of industries. And then they hand that down to the creative team. And man, I'm exhausted just talking about that right there, but there's so many ways that message of the user's or the patient's needs in the very beginning can be translated and misconstrued all the way down the chain. But by the time it got to the people that are actually building the solution and coming up with the creative, you're kind of sitting there going, why are we even building this? What are we solving? Does anyone care about this thing? It sort of felt like lifeless. You're just sort of getting stuff done. You're an order taker. You're knocking out art. And I know in a lot of places that the agency planner and the account manager will oftentimes include a creative or two in the strategy phase, but it's not an integrated team. Like it's not the designer, it's not the developer, it's not the people actually building it that are in those early meetings talking to people, dissecting the needs. So getting to the solution of this one, the thing that you can do, and I've seen this tactic worked in many, many environments, and I use it constantly, is setting up workshops. I think it's a great way to knock down barriers. And basically what you do is instead of in the strategy phase, somebody somewhere going, we need X, Y, and Z because we think our customers need X, Y, and Z, so you should go build us X, Y, and Z. You get everybody in the same room together. You lock yourselves in for a day, and the goal of this is to come up with a really clear strategy. You're going to try to gain alignment with everybody. So you may not have the perfect understanding of what the end customer's needs are, but at least you'll understand what the business needs are. Like every as a designer or as a copywriter, somebody doing the fine tuning, making those micro decisions, you can hear all of the conversation that you had that day in your head when you're making those choices. And there's sort of like micro validation every little step of the way. You still need larger testing to go out and make sure that you've made those interpretations right, but it gives you so much more foundation. And the way I describe this is, my job has changed from being the hands-on designer to the person that's doing the strategy. And so I see myself as the person creating the box for the designer to design the thing, right? Like if it's an empty, borderless question or ask, you say, hey, make anything, then you're gonna get nothing out of it. It's not gonna solve any problems, it's not gonna be what you want. But if you can clearly define that box, and the designer stays within that box, or the creator, I keep saying designer, but really anybody creating anything, if they stay within that box, then you're meeting the needs. So creating that box is really what the purpose of this day is. And the last two here are really important. So opening direct communication is a huge piece of this. Not having that game of telephone going up every time. So if I have a question as the person building it, I don't have to go to my manager and then go to the account staff for them to go to their manager to call up the client to then maybe go ask the sales rep the question I'm trying to get answered. So if we start here, I know that guy, I know that girl, and I can just call them up. And I found that the risk of allowing people at the ground level to have that kind of transparency and access is far out. The benefit of having that kind of access is far outweighed by the risk of somebody being kind of silly or stupid or screwing up in an email. And I think that organizations that try to like contain everybody so there's only one route of communication, it really just gets bogged down. And sure, I might misspell something in an email, but I'm going to build you a better product, and that's what you're never know. You're probably remember that I'm still a bad speller. It's horrible. I tried really hard. Had my wife proofread it, but All right, so that's the first one. Before I go, I've been going a million miles an hour. Any thoughts or questions or ideas around this? Has anybody done workshops before? Like day lock-ins? Yeah, someone? Anybody? Yeah?
A couple of us just finished starting.
So you did basically that?
Yes.
Okay. But you also built something too?
Yes.
Even better. Cool, and then you got the book.
Yes.
And then did you find value in it? Was it worth doing?
Yeah, in the right, in the right situations, absolutely.
Okay.
Question on, you had team members that sales marketing versus don't have the same point, it doesn't seem to be.
Sure.
How do you help with that?
So how do you find middle ground when there seems to be an impasse? Most of the time, I've found the impasse to be on what the solution is that's being proposed. Somebody going, no, I think we shouldn't have the headlines say this, or I think we should build this thing over here. And what I've had really good luck in is getting them to both figure out what problem they're trying to solve, like reverse engineer those solutions. And so when they reverse engineer the solutions, you oftentimes find that you're trying to solve the same problem, you just have a different tactic for solving that problem. Or somebody might actually think they're solving a different problem. And so they're going, no, I'm fighting for this tactic, and I'm fighting for this tactic, but you're not solving the same thing. So maybe one makes sense to do later, or one, the strategy can change a little bit in those situations, but I've had really good luck kind of ignoring the, please give me X, Y, and Z, and going down to what actually is needed. And that oftentimes in the lean space needs, talking to customers and doing more research and having all that fun stuff happen, but it's very helpful to avoid the, I want it this way, I think it should look like this kind of conversations. So, cool. Awesome, so on to number 2. Cool. So, already done this a little bit, but talk to the users. So talking about those IVAs a little bit more hands-on stuff about what I did with them. The main goal was to get the sales reps to deliver information to the doctors and the doctors to sell drugs to the patients. And hopefully everybody gets rich from this. Well, I didn't get rich from this, but the pharmaceutical companies and definitely me. And a lot of other people kind of above me did, but I loved this show. I thought it was so cool to think of a big giant pool of money to go swimming in. I want to build like a big foam pit made of little coins that I can actually do it and not be crushed when I jump into it. So these MBAs are a really, really big cool factor. And so this gets to that, actually, to this conversation just a second ago. The clients were pushing to have this because they thought it would make their brands look really high tech. Everyone else is walking with paper, and we're walking with these really cool screens, right? They're super neat. And they're gonna impress the doctors, and everyone's gonna love the reps and think that our pharmaceutical company is way more high tech than the other pharmaceutical company who hasn't spent millions of dollars on this, and they just printed a piece of paper. So just a little bit of stats on them. Tablets have come a long way. I mean, showing off, gratuitously showing off my little hardware piece here. This is a phenomenal tablet. Like if we had built stuff for this, this would have been a huge, probably might have been a better success. But this is the Surface Pro 3.
Never heard of that.
Never heard of it? I have some links for you. So these things were 4 to 5 pounds. They had 2 to 3 hours battery life, and they track what you do. So the marketing team loved this. How long did the reps stay on a slide? Did they go show all the slides? How long did the call take? They thought this would like revolutionize the industry. And the reps were like, I don't want anybody watching me about what I'm doing. I'm gonna get my, you should be judging me on what I sell, not how long I stay on a slide, right? So we were always in these meetings with the marketing teams, and they were so jazzed about this. We built all kinds of technology to track what the reps did. They wanted to like put cameras on them and microphones. It was nutty. So on the other side, you got this guy, which is less than a pound. I mean, probably a few ounces, right? It's got infinite battery life. It can't die. Like you can't pull it out of your bag, and then you're gonna have to find a charger to plug in for sure, right? Which, dude, with 2 hours battery life over there, and it's 100% customizable. So I don't think this is really allowed, and I think they've cut down on it a lot more since I've left. But they would cut these things up and like take articles from magazines and paste them in there, and the reps loved them because they could tell any story they wanted to tell the doctors. Totally not kosher, but they did it. And then when you said, no, you can't do that anymore, you have to do this, like all right. So essentially, came to the realization that these things are kind of a pain in the ass, and these were a simple but ideal solution for getting the message across to doctors, right? And this kind of pains me because I really don't like paper. I love tech. Like I go through all kinds of pains to make sure that I can do stuff without paper, but that's just me. I don't expect everyone to do that.
What year was that?
This was 2006, pre-iPad.
When did Microsoft come out with it?
Well, that's a very complicated question to answer.
I think it was out almost a decade before the iPad.
Because that was
on.
You know, they had Windows 98, and they came out with the tablet edition of 98, I believe. I was selling like Gateway computers. Remember Gateway? Just cool, right?
Jobs had a tablet.
Newton, right? Yeah, there was a couple early things. And I think I'm going to answer your question the way I feel that's most valuable to everybody. They came out with a tablet when this one came out. Like the third version is the first time a tablet has been useful. So
right, but they had a previous version, like 5 or 10 years before the iPad, but never caught on.
Right, didn't catch on. It didn't work. Yeah, exactly. Right.
Won't come out. That's cool.
All right. So yeah, the reps basically said these things suck. I don't want them. Keep hitting that. All right. So the big takeaway here is get out of the building. So if any of you have read Lean, this is like a major thing, right? Don't sit inside and think you know all the answers. Get out there and talk to people. I think if there's one thing to remember from tonight, it's this one. Don't forget this. Just get out. I have a hard time. I'm starting a new venture. I'm not going to go into it. I'm not going to pitch it. But I still have a hard time. And I'm sitting there and I sit at my desk and I'm like, oh, I know exactly what they're going to want. I get into this cycle where I think I know them. I know the audience, and I got to force myself to stick to that because it's really easy to get into the mode of creating and thinking you know best.
Actually, I was going to say some of the metrics-based lean techniques there's a lot of lean proponents that believe that that's all they need but they never do understand the behavior that they're observing in the metrics.
Right, that's interesting. I'm glad you pointed that out because I'm actually really terrible at quantitative stuff. I'm really good at qualitative. And so I actually need help with the metric side of things. But I've found to be, myself to feel like I've been a pretty good value on teams where they're really heavily quantitative. And I can come in and be like, that's not really what they felt like. You know, you kind of like, there's a gut feeling there and kind of reading emotions that go beyond just the metrics. But I need to get better at the metric side of stuff too. So. All right, so getting out of the building, how do you do this in an organization? So first things first, you gotta get some questions. This is all pretty straightforward. Again, this is very surface level, but the gist of it is if you even can get a hold of 3 to 5 users that match, you know, your particular segment, if you've identified your use cases and different target markets. Even if you talk to 3 to 5 people, I've had success with just one. I mean, just getting some input at all from that person and that lives in that world and has their perspective is massively valuable. But 3 to 5 seems to be like a really efficient spot for really low budget stuff. Whether it's you're starting a startup or you've got a client that has no money and you're trying to like just slap this stuff together in some way, shape, or form and be smart about it without spending a huge budget on research. 3 to 5 has been a great sweet spot for me. And I really prefer in person. I like sitting down with somebody, getting to know and build a rapport. But I can do over the phone too, and I've had good luck with that where people are across the country. I just finished a round of interviews about a month ago, and I had to talk to about 8 people in a week. It was all on the phone. I got a lot of really good data. So I think structuring your questions well and being okay with changing your questions. And I think this is where maybe people on the more quantitative side would shudder, but I'm totally fine, like after the first interview, changing my questions drastically because I've learned a whole bunch. I can keep refining the way I talk to and gain information from those people.
Yeah, so one of the really common questions I get also is, oh, hey, why can't I just go run a survey? And a lot of times it's for that point that Nick brings up is a survey, you're already predefined what you're going to ask and what you're going to learn about. So if someone ever says anything that's interesting, you can go deeper into it. Versus when you're running these interviews in person or on the phone, you can really gauge when someone says something that is worth following up on. And so generally, unless you can run thousands upon thousands on the surveys, it's very different than being able to actually talk with 10, 15 people and gain insights that way.
Yeah, I love that part. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm not hearing much social metrics.
Sorry?
Back a while back, we talked about choosing your team.
Yeah.
Looking for diversity. In this case, you're going to talk to, you may go for the diversity, but if you find an interesting point, if you knew where they're coming from, you might go back and just quickly make a call. First person.
Absolutely. I'm doing I've started a second new company now, just as the last couple of weeks, and our target demographic is high schoolers. And so we've been talking to a lot of parents, and I'm a parent of a 6 and a 3-year-old, so I've got a kid in kindergarten, so it doesn't really count, but I'm kind of getting used to this, the school system. We're 100 days in. And so what I've already found is just talking to people casually about it, they're like, oh, middle schoolers would love this. Oh man, you think you're like that young. So now making all these questions crop up, like do I open up to a whole other segment and see what that's going to take, and there's going to be a whole other new set of people to talk to. So, but yeah, being kind of dynamic with those when you get the answers and kind of being open to what they say. And like you said in the survey, you know, we built a survey and it only targets high school. Like the first question is, are you a parent of a high schooler or are you in high school? Right, so we automatically would have never found that really great insight. All right, so you get feedback, and then one of the things I love most is being able to turn the feedback into something tangible and feeding it back to other people in the team that aren't part of the research team. Because usually your research team is pretty small, 1, 2, 3 people, at least in my cases. And so being able to go back to others and catch them up to that, because usually in my situations, I've been involved with kind of creating the questions, the initial interview questions with these people. And then we go and start doing this back and forth, and the questions change, and we learn a whole bunch. So then we've got to figure out how to like educate them and get them caught up to where we are mentally on the knowledge that we have, which can be challenging sometimes because they're going into it going, yeah, we're just going to help high schoolers, and then we learn, oh, hey, middle schoolers, maybe we should just target middle schoolers. That's what we learn. It's hard, especially in a client-vendor relationship, it's hard to have those conversations in a tactful way to kind of say, yeah, your whole thing you were trying to do is kind of wrong. You got to go this way. So had a lot of those interesting conversations. Let's see. All right, so on to number 3. We good on time? A little over halfway. Killing ego before it kills creativity. I think this is a really major factor for why I wanted to leave the agency world. My creativity was massively stifled. I felt like I was just, like I needed to go home and create things for my job, being a creator, to feel like I could actually make something valuable. So I had this creative director that had a really huge hard hat, big green hard hat. And he had this, it was for this brand that we were working on, and this hard hat was his like trophy in his office. And he loved video content. It was like his favorite thing. He wanted to put everything in a video, and this was this was like kind of 2006, that early YouTube 2004, something like that. But getting farmers always go years behind. So the video was a big deal, and he wanted to be in the frontier of putting content out there in this new format. And so we took all of our brand stuff and we're shoving it into these videos. And we're sitting around the conference table, and this is actually a picture of that conference table. So if you've ever been in advertising agency, we all color match every day and make sure that we make a nice palette. It's very vibrant and useful. Sitting around the table, and so we had 34 videos we were making that basically trapped the majority of the content into these videos, which for him was like the greatest thing ever. I think he really just wanted to be a movie director. But for users, you'd have to go through and like, if you want to learn about this medicine, you have to watch all these videos, and you're kind of like stumbling through them, and they're 30 seconds to 2 minutes long, and they've got these like corny people in these hard hats, walking around telling you about this drug. And smart ass me says, that's a really dumb idea. People are going to get really annoyed. And the whole room just went quiet. And everyone looks at me, and you can see his face, like this guy was just not happy with the new dude, this young guy, telling him he's kind of dumb, and his big vision doesn't make any sense. He kind of held it, he bit his tongue, went on with the meeting, pretended that I didn't say it. I was actually really surprised that more people didn't back me up. I was kind of looking around like, yeah, this is dumb, right? This is totally dumb. I got nothing. I had a moment, this wasn't going off script. I had a moment after being there for about 4 years where I thought I was going crazy. It's a 400-person company, just over 200 creatives. And I felt like I was saying things that nobody understood. Like I actually started thinking, if I'm the only one saying it, I must be crazy. Like everybody else must understand what's going on. And the thing that gave me the breath of fresh air is in Chicago, the startup scene started kind of coming up, and I started getting involved in all the meetups. So I'll lead the lean group up there. I was involved in the lean group up there.
Is the battery going in?
Is it already?
Well,
I got back up.
Version 1 of the microphone.
Right. So, I thought I was going crazy. And so it was really, really enlightening to get out and meet people like you that are trying to build things and be smart and not just waste money. The bright side of it is I got to waste a lot of their money learning how to waste money or learn how to not waste money. So, basically, the takeaway from this one is fight the culture of fear. It's essentially, everyone's afraid to make a mistake, right? The culture is, if you make a mistake, you're wrong. You have to show that you always know you're right. And if you ever show that you're weak, somebody's gonna just gobble you up, right? And it's gonna be embarrassing, and you're gonna get in trouble, and your bosses will scold you, and you're gonna get fired. That's a really shitty environment to be in. And I'm assuming some of you in this room have been in that situation. 'cause a lot of people I've talked to, this resonates very well with them. So the symptoms or the causes of this. Well, the culture makes people feel like they have to own everything, even if it's not their idea, but especially if it's their idea. This feature was my idea. It's the best feature. It's got to get built. It's got to go on the homepage. That's like the biggest thing, right? Like above the fold, on the homepage, above the fold. I actually had one campaign where I had the clients in the room and I had a meeting, and I wrote down every single thing they've requested in the last month has to go above the fold on the homepage. And I said, if you put all these on the homepage above the fold, everything's going to be like 8.5. So I forced them to prioritize the top 5 things. And that's what they got. And it worked really well. And every time they're like, well, we need to elevate this thing. It's like, well, you said those 5. You need to go on the highest priority. And that's actually a tactic. If you guys haven't tried it, works pretty well. Just put it on the board. So this whole me versus them mentality is
Oh no.
it might be me. I'm just like, I block radio waves. Yeah, so some of the things that you should catch yourself if you hear yourself saying are the lines like, I think it should be that way. I really like it when. Those are kind of toxic, and I don't think people realize it because they're not founded in any sort of place of being productive. They're just your opinions. They're subjective. And if you bring those comments into a meeting, you end up kind of derailing things, I think. And people have a hard time fighting against that, especially if you are at a higher pay grade. It's really hard to come back and say, but the data shows, or what the research showed. And they go, well, I don't care, I like this.
But Nick, as
Yeah.
the qualitative guy, wasn't it helpful to hear the client provide what you call unproductive feedback because they're emoting and sharing their opinion with something which may not really be based in reality, but a qualitative guy is supposed to take that and do something with it.
Yeah, and I think part of the art in this is hearing what people want and doing the quick reversal, kind of what I mentioned, answering your question, doing that quick reversal and trying to decode what they really are trying to get out of that. If they say they want, my last talk was actually on a Twitter campaign that a client requested from me. He said, I want a Twitter campaign, but that made no sense for what he was actually trying to do. And so, even on the first phone call, I had to start backtracking, and I was immediately skeptical of, is a Twitter campaign what he really needs? So it's a hard thing to navigate. And rank shouldn't matter. If you want to get good ideas out, the best ideas, don't let rank get in the way, and try to be open to all the possible ideas out there. So move much more to an us mentality. This is I think a really challenging one, and might be the most hard of all the tactics here to implement in some organizations because if you're fighting that culture, it's inherent, and people are afraid of their job. Like they're literally afraid they will lose their jobs, and so they're not willing to let go and take any risk whatsoever, and they just want to get their job done and they want to go home. And those are really, really tough places. But some things you can do are talk to your direct managers if you feel like they might be open to it, and see if in the scope of working with them and maybe 2 or 3 other people, you can maybe be more open and see if you can test out a new degree of like level playing field instead of it always sort of being that management level makes the decision, everyone else sort of just executes. So that's one way I've had some luck doing that, is starting really, really small and see if you can get 3 or 4 people to operate that way and show that there's value in it. So the next thing, data back up your claims, quantitative, and be open to everyone's ideas. So the 4th tactic is create a badass cross-functional team. This can also be hard, but I think it's easier than some people think it is within organizations. You have to do a little bit of lying, though, unfortunately, usually at the beginning, kind of, script the system a bit. This is that guerrilla tactics again. So this is some of the silos I was talking about earlier, but silos are really the death of communication. In any organization, it doesn't matter what departments these are, I'm sure you've felt this somehow. If you're in one team and you need to do something to get it to the next team, this is the typical waterfall methodology, right? You've got to get your ducks in a row, you've got to build the documentation from what you've learned and then hand it off to the next team. and your expectation is that they're going to take it and add value and move it on. But most of the time, we're optimistic about our timeline, so we're running a little bit late, and our documentation took a little bit longer, and there's someone sick, and blah, 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 but the timeline hasn't moved. But now, second person in the chain has to take it and do all their work in a more compressed time frame, and hope that they get it done, and maybe they can play catch up so that the third people can actually get it done on time. It's like a horrible cascade effect, and I think it happens a lot of places. So it's the documentation here that really hurts, and these barriers. So when problems arise, somebody oftentimes may go to their management, go up level, and say, hey, I'm having trouble with this, something's not working, can you come in and see if you can fix it? Usually what they'll do is go to the other managers, right, and see if they can fix it at that level and have a discussion, and maybe they'll disseminate what their decisions are to the rest of the team, kind of still in their very clear silos and roles and responsibilities. If things still don't get fixed, you can go higher than that, get escalated to whoever's on the top of the totem pole. But this is really messy, and all those little lines kind of stress me out, right? I don't like just being able to talk to one person or going up one or just over one. I like being able to talk to everybody. So when you're creating your team, you have to choose a team that fits you, no matter the makeup. And there's some pretty cool teams out there. These guys are awesome. The problem with these guys, though, if one of them's sick, they're kind of screwed. Like there's going to be, walking around with one leg or no arm or something. You guys know Voltron, right? They make a giant robot together. And then the awesome 90s knockoff of that live action. This is actually a little bit after my time, but my brother was a huge fan, so we had a lot of Power Ranger stuff. And I was partial to the blue guy because he wasn't as stuck up as the red guy. And who's that white guy? It was like cycling some random dude. Have you seen that? But I luckily got stuck with a really phenomenal team. So this is my shameless plug. This is my team, Gravity Ward. We're design development consultancy. We're all distributed all across the central time zone, and they're the team I dreamed about having in any organization I've been in. It's cross-functional from all the way from research through back-end development, but we all complement each other. We have a little bit of overlap, so we kind of pick up the slack when things are, the timeline's crunched, and we have really solid communication. We don't have any middle management. We sort of just say what we're going to get done. We kind of follow semi-agile processes. We have stand-ups. We say, hey, this is what we're going to do tomorrow. This is what we've done today, and we get that done. And when, if there's a blocker, or there's a conflict, we raise it, and we help each other get through it. So there's a lot of trust, a lot of transparency. We actually have a policy at Gravity Ward. We just hired our first employee in January, and we have an open salary policy. So our first employee can see what we make, and it's all 100% transparent. And we read up a lot about it, and we really like the system. We like that level of transparency. We think it builds trust. And it's worked out really well for us so far. So we've had a lot of interest in people wanting to work for us, even though we don't have enough work to more people yet, but hopefully someday. Oh yeah, also, interestingly enough, a couple of these guys are the ones that were my gorilla team in the agency world. So we were sort of in the background, working on stuff, trying to be smart about the way we did business, even though our managers may not have known that we were doing it. So what you want to do is find like-minded individuals, various disciplines. So go across the spectrum of different teams, find people that might be willing to team up with you on a small project, and start super small. If you're lucky enough to find a small enough project, maybe something internal that's not going to anger some clients or something if it goes wrong, and something that doesn't have a lot of oversight. If you have some successes with that, you've proven that there's some value, you can bring it maybe to your management and say, hey, we normally take 3 months to do this. We got it done in 3 weeks. We had these metrics of success. We met those metrics where we exceeded them. Using these methods, can we maybe try this on a larger scale? And I think, and from what I've read, I haven't done this I did this in my agency world. It stayed gorilla. It didn't go any bigger. We tried. But from what I've heard, I've heard some case studies of this going larger and organizations kind of getting infected, is that the right way to say it? Getting infected with the lean bug and kind of wanting to spread it and pick up these methodologies more and more. And if it's successful enough, maybe it becomes part of the culture of the organization. So, me and Alan can attest to this, and Ben, I'm a huge advocate of using the right tools and trying out new tools to be more efficient and try things that work really well. So, Basecamp was something I used for years and years. I don't use it as much, but I still think it's a phenomenal tool. Has anybody in here used Basecamp? Yeah? Any luck? You guys like it? I don't know. What's the...
There's a lot of them that are kind of in that same,
Right.
type.
Project management, yes, yeah, small team project management. This needs to be larger too.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty rudimentary.
Sure. I think what it does really well is it kind of covers up some of the shortcomings of email. I think Basecamp's a really great conversation aggregator. And if your team uses it well, you can even use it as your own team while the rest of the world doesn't use it. And you can still pull in those communications and have them logged and timestamped. So when you're in those fear-based cultures, and somebody says, you didn't do this when you said you were gonna do this, or I never said that, blah, blah, blah. You're not digging through like various archives of emails. It's all right in Basecamp. So definitely leverage that before. So that's where Basecamp's great. Another great one is Trello. It's really taken off in the last couple of years. If you guys haven't used it, it's a phenomenal to-do board, especially for teams that aren't sitting in the same room. It's the most visual, just sort of, hey, these are the pile of things we need to get done. It's assigned to these people, and oh look, I got that done. I'm gonna drag it into done. And you can make the list as complex as you want, but essentially it's just a big board of Post-its, and you can say, here's what I'm gonna do, here's when I'm gonna do it, and it works great on mobile, so I'm constantly like getting pinged, oh, so-and-so did this, and I can then move a card over and say it's done. Everyone can see status, and I think a big part of communication is not having to send emails to check status, right? Like not having your manager go, hey, how's it going? Like that doesn't really work in this world of being not just lean in the quick sense, but just being quick, trying to get stuff done without people asking you how you're doing. And then my personal favorite, and I'm sort of in love. Has anybody in here used Slack yet? Okay, should all, right now, I'm gonna stop talking. Go sign up for Slack. No, seriously, it actually is complete. Our team started using about 6 months ago. We haven't sent an email to each other since. Like completely obliterated email. We're using that and Google Hangouts to do group chat stuff. Google Chat. So just like GChat or Hangouts. It's all now concentrated in Slack. I've got a link in this, so again, shameless promo. The link will give me $100 and you guys $100 if you sign up and use it. So please feel free to use that link if you like. But it's fantastic, and it's enabled my team to feel like we are closer and have better communication than I did when I was in the same space working right next to somebody. Yes. Communities. The communities is a little bit larger. It's more like a social grouping for. You do, yeah. So it's.
Closer to like HipChat, right?
It's much closer, much more akin to HipChat. It's just basically like if anyone used IRC or any like group room chats back in the day, it's basically that, but it integrates with every possible service in the world. And their execution is so well done. Like they definitely did their research. They know their audience. Every interaction makes sense. It's really hard to describe. It sounds just like a chat app, but you can't really feel it until you try it. It's hard to describe. But really solid.
I'd say, the big thing with like Slack and HipChat is it lets you have asynchronous conversations. So if you have a team that's remotely distributed, you can catch up on everything that the company is talking about. So that, when my team was more distributed, that was a big thing. We had people in different time zones. Someone is 6 hours behind. I could have a conversation about something, and then they can read everything and chime in.
Yeah, and so you can subscribe to a channel. So you create a channel like, or make a new website. So the website channel, right? And there'd be 3 people in that website channel, and they're subscribed to it, so they'll be getting pinged whenever there's conversation happening. But then I can have 6 other channels in my team, and I won't be pinged about those. But if I want to see what's going on with the marketing effort, I can jump in that channel and just kind of read up on what's going on. So it's all about transparency.
They have Apple too.
It's not everything, yeah.
It's an Apple entry.
Yeah, we're sending this. Yeah. What's that?
So it is IRC.
It's essentially the new version of IRC. Yeah, so anyone with old IRC fans, you'll love it.
Is it free?
It is not free, but
Is it mandatory?
Yeah.
no, it's.
Sign up for free.
I think it's $6 a month per user. But it's
Free to download, then they charge
free to
you
download, and then if you use my link, you'll get $100 credit. but you get a couple months free. Yeah, so tools, really important. All right, so moving on to the fifth one. It's funny, somebody just said this to me 10 minutes before the talk. So the world's moving much more to outcomes, not deliverables standard. And I love that it is, and more people are thinking about it. So one of the statements I hear a lot in my agency life is, our inefficiencies make us money. And I like choked every time I heard it. It felt so wrong, and I didn't have the words to express why it didn't seem to make sense. Like, how can we be inefficient? Like, sure, it makes us some money, but I don't understand how inefficiencies can make us money in the long run. How can it work? So here's the kind of this is especially painful when I hear people say that on a Monday morning, when this was me Saturday, Sunday. And if any of you have ever worked in the advertising world, it is a painful schedule. My first daughter was born when I was working there, and she was 3 when I left. So I basically missed like her first 3 years of her life. I mean, maybe like 45 minutes a day, right? If I was lucky. If I left at 5, which, that was a joke. So, I mean, this was so common, it wasn't even like, we just expected people to be there on the weekends. And then they come in and go, inefficiencies make us money. It's like, you're the manager who went home on Friday. Yeah, we're making money. So it's this really short-sighted view on profitability. So you take a salaried employee, you bill a client hourly, and then you grind them into the ground, you make a whole lot of money. It's a really cool formula if you can convince people to do it for a little while. And then you're like, oh, you're in college, you're gonna love being in the advertising world. Come on, we'll bill you hourly, $190 an hour, and pay you 20. It's great. But what it does is nobody's needs are met. I mean, in the long run, clients are frustrated, and employees are just devastated. I mean, the cycle rate of people going through agencies is just, it's astonishing. I mean, the amount of money it takes to onboard an employee versus how long they stay, it's got to be a loss. Like, you got to charge $300 an hour to make up for all that inefficiency. So I know this now, and I wish I had this slide, 7 or 8 years ago. I feel like you guys are done. The proof in the pudding, though, was the first IVA that I worked on, the interactive control aid, was this like $1 million plus project. Took almost a year. And it was a huge initiative. It was like a beta platform for the agency. It was the first time anyone had done this thing. It was a really big deal. I was very excited to work on it. But I had a lot of those questions going on in my head when you saw that slide about the IVA and having 2-hour battery life, and tiny screen, and all that stuff. I was thinking, that sounds kind of painful to use. And so what we ended up finding out is that we had too many complaints from the sales reps once it launched. And the client shut it down like 6-7 months after launch. So it took longer to build. And it took to find out that it wasn't going to work. And it was, I had a lot of pain from it because I owned it, right? It was my baby, right? I got it out there in the world and hundreds of slides of content that was formatted. And they're like, yeah, it sucks. So it's kind of a good lesson to learn when it's not my money that I'm working. So the way to combat this is to reward learning and problem solving. This is a really great kind of paraphrasing of quotes here. Lean thinking pushes us to seek the business outcomes, then question whether these features will get us to those outcomes, and then have conversations with stakeholders around what metric you're trying to move. So these are kind of just highlighting some of the points I've said already, but really it's a great quote. This guy's awesome. If anyone can pronounce his last name, please tell me how you say it, because I can't get the LF to happen at the tongue. Yeah. You guys know him? I mean, he didn't spoke here. Yeah, so he's really.
If you ever have the chance to see him, he's hilarious and also incredibly informative.
Yeah, he does a ton of workshops, and he's kind of moved out of doing Lean UX to teaching it, which is really cool, and he's kind of a figure, so. We're getting close to done. So don't just define metrics, but define reachable metrics. This is a really big one. Like, we want to make more money. Make us more money. Like that's a lot of the metrics that we were told. If you make us more money, you'll be a success. And it's like, oh, what is that? How do I don't know what you're saying. Increase global sales. Okay, that's such a grand vision. I don't even know how my little thing is gonna do that, or have a measurable impact. Something more akin to gain X number of new signups through the online campaign in 6 months. Right? It's got a timeline. It's got a figure that you can meet or not meet. You can track it. You You can say 3 months in, we've met half of that, so we're on track, or we've met 20% of that, so we're not doing something right. Can we pivot and be a little bit smarter? But it's a tangible, reachable goal. I think that's a trap that I know I fell into a lot. It's like set these goals that just didn't make any sense. They weren't attainable. And I like doing time frames. I like to make it even smaller than 6 months. It's nice to have too, because then you feel like you're doing stuff. You're making some progress. All right, so that's do a quick recap here. So the 5 tactics I went over are include stakeholders early, talk to the users, kill ego before it kills creativity, build a badass cross-functional team, and outcomes not deliverables. But one of the biggest things here I want you to remember is, no matter what, just keep learning. There's so many great resources out there. There's so many great workshops you can pay for. There's free stuff, a lot of things online. There's these talks. And I think the thing that I appreciate the most is that, just like I was talking about when I first started getting into the startup world, I really appreciate the culture. It's such a pay-it-forward culture. I've been in Austin for 11 months, and like I wouldn't have been here if it wasn't for Emiliano. There's like probably 5 or 6 people in the room who I know very well now. And all because the network here is just super great about helping each other out. So I'm extending the offer to all of you as well. If I can help you connect with anybody, help you with anything, more than happy to grab a coffee as much as time permits. And but yeah, I just appreciate you guys coming out, and it's been really fun. Thoughts, questions, comments? Yeah.
What have you found about scalability? It just seems to be we're at the stage now, organization structure, all about
Scalability for lean, or for what?
A big project. Let's go after ISIS.
You mean like in organizations trying to implement lean?
Yeah, say you got to be on the first base.
Sure.
You got a team. You had a team in that place.
Right.
And left so you could get everybody else to become what you saw.
Right.
But you never made that as an agency.
Right. So that's a good question. It's actually something I've been thinking a lot about. And your question is why I did this talk tonight, because I've been thinking about how I've been talking to some of the creative directors and the strategy directors and UX directors and some of the agencies here in Austin. We've been talking a lot about this topic, about how to instill lean in those structures. And honestly, the biggest hurdle is just the upper level management being okay with the perceived risk of not having defined deliverables when you start a project, right? That seems to be how much is it going to cost, how long is it going to take? That's what all the clients want to know. And so if you can't tell them that up front, they don't even want to sign anything. And so getting over that hurdle is something I don't know how to get over yet. And I think it has a lot to do with the sales team structure, selling products as opposed to quick turnaround services. What I mean by that is a lot of big companies that hire agencies, they want a new website, they want a new look and feel, whatever it is, and they launch, especially in digital projects, they launch the website and they go, oh, thanks, what's the next project? You know, no, I just gave birth. Like, you gotta nurture this thing and grow it, right? It's not a figure it all out in the beginning and launch it and hope you got it right. That leads to just a lot of waste. You can't learn quickly. So I don't have all the answers for that. Hopefully I can have a round 2 of this in a month or a few months or a year and tell you something. I'm actually working with some teams trying to figure that out.
In a lean team, it seems like it would be really easy to see somebody who is lean. Since everybody's talking to everybody, how do you deal with somebody who's not really fully?
Yeah, it is really obvious really quick. And I think from what I've seen, I think everyone has it in them to be honest and open and want to build something and be interested in providing value as opposed to just being like a dead weight. There's plenty of organizations in this world where you can go and get a paycheck and be a dead weight. But where I've seen people that have struggled with it is their natural tendency is to kind of clam up and not want to be open about stuff. But you kind of trick them into it with some of these tools, and they can't really be private, and they can't hide what they're talking about, and then they get more and more comfortable with that transparency and realize that it's not about it's not about the thing, my ideas that I own. It's about getting the, being in agreement and being on the same path about being successful as an organization, right? Like whatever your project is, launching that and being successful and defining what that success is. So the individual definitely struggles with it, but I think if you have a supportive team and the person, like you can judge that that person is not really a bad seed and they really want to try to make it work, you can usually get them. But if they don't, then, I mean, you have to ask them to leave.
So this is, maybe I'll just validate a little bit of your case study on who makes the decisions and what. Literally today, we had a discussion about the tool for us, the sales team, because the current tool isn't working. And it came to mind, the one that we're using, I did not know it, but it was chosen by the accounting team. Which says why it's not working. And the reason was because they had the budget to make the decision about what one was going to integrate to their systems to serve their purposes. And it was also going to do some stuff for the recruiting area. So we're going to use that. That's what we're going to get. So they have the budget. Where my question becomes, how do you get into the conversation of within a structure that isn't as lean, how the budget can be distributed?
As far as using tools?
Yeah, about how to choose the path we're going to when certain areas of the budget.
Well, budgets are fine. I do want to hit on one point that you reminded me of that I didn't say in my talk about the tools. What's great about these tools is they're all super inexpensive, and I think the last stat I saw for Basecamp, they're in like over 400 of the Fortune 500 companies, and they know that because they have the registered email addresses of people in, IBM and Dell that are using it. Totally not approved. Like it's not an approved tool by that company. And sure, I'm sure they have some, but they don't appeal enterprise. People sign up for these tools because it works for their small teams. So you may not have to use that tool if you get, your cohort of people that want to be a little bit more nimble. As far as budgets go, I'm not sure exactly how to answer that.
Well, it was just when you get into running the, obviously, you're talking, there's a level at which you're talking about the organization structure, but it tends to come into the budget too.
Right.
So how do you do it where
So I think the
just
answer,
budgets?
the answer is the outcomes versus deliverables, right? Your accounting department was looking at, just the checks and boxes and give some tools to people. They weren't partnering with you, understand what your requirements were, the sales and with the recruiting department, figure out what's the best solution for all of us, right?
No
And
experience.
that's the ultimate issue. It's not, they still could have the budget, they still could be improving it, but they need a partner to figure out what's the best thing.
One of the things I've had success with when it comes to budgets in a client-vendor relationship is when I sell doing sort of a more lean process, instead of saying it's going to be $1 million and take 3 years, like, which I have no idea what's the whole number, right? What I say in those situations when they want a number is I go, look, at some point I'll be able to provide you a more large-scale budget, but if we can determine what your smallest possible valuable product could be, the MVP essentially, or whatever that thing is. Let us define that smallest piece, and I can tell you exactly how much that's going to cost and how long it's going to take. And then once that's done, we will know more than we know today. And we can have a discussion about how much you want to do next. So instead of saying you need to write a check for $1 million, you can write a check for a few $1,000s and have none of that risk of signing a check for $1 million. But people inherently feel that if you can't give them a number, it's going to be 10 million. It's like, no, you have the control of the spigot, right? Like, this is you having that control, as opposed to me going, give me all your water, and I'm just gonna drink it until it's gone. And then I'm probably gonna be wrong and ask you for more money anyway. So that's usually what happens. So as far as like small budgets go, or just budgeting in general, I've had success with having that kind of conversation, and it doesn't always work. And sometimes I'm still kind of back in the corner. I have to give some big, large number that I'm not confident about. But that definitely works in a lot of cases. Yeah, in a lot of cases. Yeah, we've definitely done time and material, but it's usually, I have a lot of opinions on time and material versus fixed bid, which I'm not going to go into right now, but I think they can be successful in different ways, but we do a lot of fixed bid projects.
So change the topic instead of having this full feature fixed bid, $1 million salary.
Right. the pain point for the vendor side is we're in a constant state of writing proposals. So I'm still figuring out how to make that a little smoother, but it's still like this, you're working with a client who's a partner, but it's just this constant like trudge of gotta prove value every so often, but it's more rewarding because I don't have that stress of like, I think we're going down the wrong path.
How do you convince the management to say, hey, let's
I am the management in this case, but I don't know. I wasn't successful in the industry. Right? Seeing that, yeah, I don't. Yeah, it's definitely politics, and we get a retainer for X number of dollars a month, and we just have a consistent burn rate. That's a really nice, cushy way to ride. That works for a lot of service companies. So there's not a perfect meshing of a lot of these.
I know that I think the term goes more in whatever the it should be a good process, but have you found value in going back to that cross-functional team trying to identify what ways to do things, even if you follow these 5 tactics, and what point do you do that? Again, so what do we move away from? I just want to think back.
That's a bad. Yeah, that's a weird word.
Yes, sort of feedback. Yeah, well, that's nice in theory, but in practice, I'm saying that's what I can see, what I hear.
So I think we've had some success in that with sort of just rolling out features and a little bit of the agile approach of kind of designing. I guess we're not as strict as designing perfect sprints, but we do have, and especially some of our larger projects, we do have very regular 1 week or 2 week executive meetings with as people as high up as possible. And that kind of works as a postmortem. It kind of alleviates that pressure of like waiting to the very end. We can learn what their feedback is on the smaller cycles, so it is a little bit of that feedback loop. But we have done postmortems when we like launch the big thing at the end-ish, but during the cycles we tend to do just constant check-ins. It's more about that kind of keeping transparency.
And then you try to quantify any ways that it occurred, and so what do you do with those figures?
Yeah, I mean, so I don't have figures, but usually it'll be something like, we were pursuing this path, we thought this functionality would solve the problem, but then we discovered that so-and-so user needs to accomplish this, and the solution we had doesn't fit that use case. And so we had to come up with a whole new solution, and that's going to take longer to build, but it'll actually meet all your use cases instead of, I think the thing we have to keep reiterating for them is that we can have kind of these micro difficult conversations as opposed to at the very end launching something that doesn't work, right? And I think those micro challenges, those difficult conversations in the now are easier than kind of tarnishing that relationship and launching something that's going to be broken. And then you can assess. You say, look, you can make those conscious decisions to ignore a use case. Say that use case is important, but we're going to launch this without that use case being met. I think, I'm going to go back to Basecamp really quick, but they relaunched a few years ago. They completely revamped their site. They left it was super painful because I had all my clients using Basecamp at the time. They left 80% of the features on the floor. They just gutted the whole application. And I felt like just naked trying to use this thing. It was really, really hard to use, but they just made the decision that we're going to take everything out and only keep very critical features, and everyone kept using it. They even said in their blog, we're going to let people figure out workarounds for the features we didn't keep them there. But that was really fascinating. They eventually added some back in, but they're far better than they were in the old implementation.
So I read Lean UX and I loved it. So I kind of took that idea of cross-functional team into the product process in my company. So it was great. We grabbed someone from our department, did a team around a feature. But then the next time around, the department has loved it so much that they wanted to shove more and more people from their department in the team. Do you think there's an optimal team size? Can a team get too big?
Yeah, I definitely think it can be. And I don't think I've reached it with my teams. I haven't been on one that's that large, but I feel like I'm gonna take a guess, an educated guess. That's probably in the 10 to 15 person range where it starts getting gangly, because then it's hard to keep everyone on the same page. My suggestion would be tackling, carving out pieces of the scope that you can have 5 or 6 people work on effectively, right? Because the difference is that you don't have 15 different skill sets, right? So now you've got 2 or 3 designers and 2 or 3 developers. They're piling up, and responsibilities become, and ownership over a piece of it becomes diluted, right? When you have 3 people owning it. So if you have one developer and one designer that's just rocking out on a small set of functionality, they can own it and make it awesome. That's, I think, the sweet spot I found.
I wonder if there's a way to employ the pigs and chickens from Agile, where you have certain, you have participants that, or you have attendees that don't participate, or ones that do. So you can sort of set things up where, okay, anybody's welcome, but we need to keep this weighted. So
Right.
it's a limited number of pigs.
Yeah, that's what I
So,
have to.
to speak to that, there's a model of Agile where essentially it's like a theater play where there's only 5 to 7 players in the play.
Gotcha.
And the theater can watch, but only the play can act.
So a theater and a
I
play?
mean, it's actually not. When you switch in and out, you have the audience who will watch the sort of product discovery.
So it's like a hockey team.
Yeah, like a hockey team. Somebody can watch the outside, but sort of back to the theater play, the audience can watch, but they only the play can act.
Gotcha.
And then they switch in and out.
Nice.
If you want to come in and interact with the play, you have to switch in and out, and that keeps
That's interesting.
the voices down.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Yeah, keeping the voices down, I think, is the part when you start adding, you get to 10 and things get noisy. Yeah. I think we're probably over.
Go for Q&A. So
Do you want-
just,
yeah.
if anyone needs to leave, feel free.
Feel free. Thank you all for coming. Whoever needs to take off, feel free. Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions? Yeah. No, good.
All right,
Time to drink. Yeah, let's go drink.